Good morning. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Frank Parker. I'm joined by some of my Crestview Strategy colleagues here in Alberta. We have Bill Anderson and Mandi Johnson in Edmonton, and here in Calgary, Evan Menzies. Yesterday, we found out that Danielle Smith will be the 19th Premier of Alberta after a hard-fought campaign over the last 5 months. She won on the 6th ballot with 53.77% of the vote. And in her remarks, she made it clear that uniting the party is her top priority, and the slate was clean for all. She'll work hard to introduce the Sovereignty Act fast and advance all of her top priorities. And this morning we found out where she's going to get a seat in the legislature with a by-election coming up in Brooks Medicine Hat. So the next election is coming up in May. Alberta politics is not going to get boring anytime soon. So I'm going to ask a couple of questions of our panel here, but we want to turn over to your questions as well. So if you'd like to submit a question, please use the Q&A button at the bottom of your Zoom window there. So Mandi, I'm going to start with you. That was a big win. Danielle came out of political retirement, pulled off a victory that many people didn't think would be possible back in May. So how did she achieve this?
I think she successfully spoke to the party's base right from the start. She took the temperature of the public, their frustration with Ottawa, much like Jason Kenney did when he ran for leader. She built a groundswell of support around that, and the other candidates failed to use her past against her. She framed the ballot question early on. I think it was much closer than people thought it was going to be. And it seems like the anyone but Danielle press conference that the other candidates may have moved some second ballot support away from her. But in the end, she did get over 50%, and she will become Alberta's next premier.
And just to quickly follow up on that, the transition's already well underway. Who's leading the charge on that, and when can we expect the next steps, like cabinet swearing in, staff being announced, and the ledge coming back?
Yeah, so I think a big name that we'll see around is Rob Anderson. Last night, Marshall Smith posted on LinkedIn that he was going to be her chief of staff. He was Mike Ellis's chief of staff previously. I think we'll see some other names that aren't strangers to the Alberta legislature. As you said, Michaela has resigned her seat as of this morning, so that's I think where we'll see the by-election, and cabinet needs to call the by-election. So I think we'll probably see that in the next week or so. She needs to get into the House to table Bill 1, which she'll really want to do herself, the Alberta Sovereignty Act. That's her main platform piece that she ran on, so she's going to want to do that herself.
So Evan, similar to Mandi, you spent a lot of time working for Danielle Smith in the Wild Rose days. What should people expect from a Smith government?
Yeah, Mandi's covered a lot of it. I think there are a lot of folks have expressed surprise or that it was unexpected, but Danielle's not unfamiliar to the public policy landscape in Alberta. She's been doing it for most of her career. She's got a huge policy brain, and I'd expect her to take immediate action on some of these big policy pieces she's been talking about. Albertans, obviously, during the COVID pandemic, there was a lot of frustration with the state of the healthcare system, the lack of capacity, the lack of access. I wouldn't be surprised to see her move on those types of issues. She addressed some of those issues, in fact, in her speech last night. So I'd see her to take immediate action on some of these big policy pieces that have been on her brain for a long time. She talked about when she was at Wild Rose. She's big on fiscal discipline and keeping balanced budgets front and center. So don't expect the taps to be pouring out necessarily. She'll want to make sure that the budget's still in order. Obviously, watching those oil prices day in and day out, like everyone else here in Alberta does. But those are a couple of things I'll be keeping my eye on early, outside of some of those major platform pieces that Mandi had mentioned on the Sovereignty Act and some fights with Ottawa. And another key platform piece, of course, as well, was an amendment to the Human Rights Act, so folks wouldn't lose their job based on their vaccine status. I think that's something you'll expect to see early as well.
And Bill, what would your best advice be for people who are looking to engage with the Smith government?
Well, no different than engaging with any government. I think you want to look to align your priorities with their priorities. So, Danielle Smith, as my colleagues have alluded to, did run a very policy-focused campaign. that's where I'd start. I'd have a look at the things that she committed to and talked about on the campaign trail, and look for opportunities to create a win-win between your policy objectives and hers. And like, I guess the second piece of advice I'd give is engage early and engage often. We're in a period of transition now, which means obviously there are going to be some chairs moving around. People are going to be finding their desks in the legislature. As Mandi alluded to, there's going to be a number of other senior staff roles that we can anticipate, being kind of firmed up in the next couple of days, couple of weeks. Being first in to talk to those folks and shape their viewpoints on how you can help them achieve their policy goals.
And Bill, I'm going to stick with you for this one. But when we're looking at what's we expect to come with the government, where would you point to the biggest areas of opportunity for businesses, organizations, et cetera?
Well, look, I mean, this is still a conservative government, right? So there are going to be areas of continuity from previous government, but there are going to be areas where Danielle Smith looks to contrast herself from the leadership of Premier Jason Kenney, right? I mean, I think a lot of those policy areas, are yet to be defined, especially as it pertains to business. I think that people are looking at the Alberta Sovereignty Act and looking to see things like, what's the substance of this legislation look like? People are looking at the economic policies that she talked about over the course of her leadership campaign. And so we're in an area where I think, we can expect a lot more clarity and granularity as government actually, transitions into office. So I'd leave my thought there on that one, Frank.
Anything to add, Mandi and Evan?
Yeah, I think Danielle leans libertarian, right? So I think we can expect to see further red tape reduction. She'll want to get out of the way of people living their lives. She's been really clear about reforming AHS, so healthcare changes on the horizon. She's committed to net zero, so there will be opportunities for renewables, but she's also a strong advocate for our energy sector. So there's going to be some balance there. I expect that she'll be looking at for partnerships for First Nations as a way to accelerate that market access. And she'll really care about inflation and affordability as that's a major issue across the country right now.
And Evan?
I don't have a lot to add from my two well-spoken colleagues, but I'll only just reinforce those points that she's got there wasn't a huge policy book released during the campaign, but there's no secret that on the big issues on energy, like Mandi mentioned, she'll be a forceful advocate for the industry, but also she'll be looking for innovative opportunities. For folks who listen to her radio show for years, they'll certainly know and be familiar with the fact that she's super interested on how to make innovative things happen and what are the levers government can pull to invite that investment in. So let's go. We've got an exciting few months ahead with the new government, and we'll wait and see.
And Mandi, I'll start with you on this one. Where are the sectors or areas of risk that we should be watching out for in the next couple weeks and months?
I think there's always an underlying anxiety with new leadership. She's got an election in 6 months, so it's really a short runway to frame public opinion of her and her government. Very little error. First 100 days are key. Her Sovereignty Act is going to risk alienating companies outside of Alberta that are looking to do business here. So I think she needs a slight pivot from that. I know we didn't see much of that from her speech last night, but I think she's going to need to soften her tone a little bit and prove to people that she's not looking to create a constitutional crisis, which I don't think she is, despite some of the rhetoric you hear out there.
Evan and Bill, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think one of the pieces Mandy alluded to earlier when she talked about Smith's campaign commitments around using technology and innovative solutions to get to net zero. That's a really interesting policy space, and it's one that is actually kind of at the intersection of Alberta government and federal government relations. Obviously, climate policy is historically not been an area where those two governments see eye to eye, and it's that creates a significant element of regulatory and policy risk for businesses in Alberta. So, Danielle Smith's ability and whoever her new environment and energy ministers are, their ability to put proactive policy solutions on the table that align with the objectives of businesses and also the policy expectations of the federal government, and balance those two. While standing up for the interests of Alberta's, oil and gas industry and energy sector, which are still such significant drivers of our economy here in this province. That's going to be a major task ahead.
All right. Oh, sorry, Evan, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to add, I think one thing that I'll be watching really closely over the next couple of weeks is the biggest distraction in Alberta for the last year and a half or so for Jason Kenney was the issue of caucus unity. And I think for not just Danielle, but the caucus in general, they are the government caucus. Albertans will be watching closely. Folks after an election like to see reconciliation and like to see it coming together. That's especially the case in the leadership race for party members. So I expect to see, there was certainly some olive branches Danielle gave out last night in her speech that I think were certainly welcome. And many Albertans will have invited with enthusiasm last night. And so I think there are some caucus members as well who will need to come together because for folks in the UCP world, caucus unity will be a big piece, especially as Mandi had mentioned, that narrow election timeline. It's coming up really quick, and there's been inter-party squabbling for a while, and this should be the final say. Danielle Smith won last night. She had the majority support of the membership, and so she'll need to obviously reach out to the other side, but the other side too will have to make sure that they meet her halfway and start marching forward together in unity, because frankly the conservative movement on the right in Alberta can't afford any more inter-party squabbling.
Yeah, and just to add to that, also, it was really nice to see the six candidates come out and stand behind her during the scrum this morning. I think that shows a lot, and in particular, proves that Todd was at that cabinet or at that caucus meeting this morning and has been brought back to the fold. So I think some of that work is well underway.
In Smith's remarks last night, when she talked about starting with a clean slate, I thought that was a really powerful statement. Any of us who are familiar with the world of partisan politics are aware of the fact that there are always divisions, fissures, and camps that exist within parties. That offering to, not only other leadership campaigns, but people who had been, loyal to, the previous premier or even premiers of conservative governments past. To come into the tent. I mean, that's, I think a very strong signal. It's now, a matter of, I think, what Evan suggests, which is, doing the hard work to actually get together as a team.
Well, and May is coming up fast. So some of the polls that have come out lately have indicated it's a neck and neck race between the NDP and the UCP. Evan, how do you think this is going to impact how Premier Smith governs, and what should people read into the polls at the moment?
It's always hard to read into the polls this far out. I'm expecting a bit of a honeymoon bump for Danielle. Just whenever you get the name premier behind or in front of your name, that usually gives a bit of a lift. So watch out for that. It's not a promise for me. I haven't seen any secret polling here, but I'm expecting that. But let's not pretend the NDP are super well organized. Albertans are obviously not as satisfied as looking at the UCP as a ballot option as they were heading into the last election in 2019. But I think the threat of the NDP will certainly help what we just talked about when it comes to UCP coming together again as a team. I think it has to be one of the primary focuses as they get closer to the election, is focusing on the threat and how to stave off the threat of the NDP and Rachel Notley in the next election. I do still think, and I say this often, that the NDP have easily the toughest route to get back into government, even with their favorable polling position. I expect Danielle's base of strength is in rural Alberta. That's pretty much sealed, locked, and delivered now with Danielle as the leader of that caucus. So it'll really be battleground Calgary. There are some seats that the NDP won in the last election that relied heavily on a vote split. If there's no vote split there are ridings that the NDP won in 2015, like Calgary Acadia, Calgary Shaw. They're just way out of reach, and those are the types of ridings that they need. So I'm not saying that Danielle Smith and UCP can rest easy, but the NDP still have a tough path ahead as well.
So we're going to do one more question before we turn it over to your questions. If you haven't submitted it, or you have more that have come out during the panel so far, use the Q&A button at the bottom of your Zoom window. So I want to hear from each of you on this. We've got a cross section of people across Alberta and across Canada on the line here today. This is mainly for people outside of Alberta. What should they know about Alberta today that's different than it has been for the last few years? Evan, do you want to start?
Yeah, I think Alberta right now is at a renewed place of confidence that it hasn't been in a while. The 2014 started in 2014. The oil price crash really took a lot of swagger out of the province. There's a renewed optimism throughout the entire province in every corner. We're not just oil and gas. There's been a lot of work done by, I'll give credit due where it belongs. With the previous NDP government put a focus on diversification, and that was continued with the UCP government, and a strong focus on investment in a lot of different sectors. There are, the new Hollywood investments, lots of the film sector is taking off. There's a lot, tech, lots of different new investment portals into the province. And so there's a new swagger and sense of confidence in the province that wasn't there simply a few years ago. And when it comes to Danielle Smith and the government today, I think you'll certainly see a lot of that swagger and sense of confidence that Alberta's deserves to have its voice heard on the national stage, that the grievances that we're talking about, we've been talking about for a while, but we're serious about them, and that there needs to be some sort of reconciliation, or at least acknowledgement. That will certainly be that the sort of sense of swagger, and that approach will certainly influence Danielle Smith's government over the next few months as well.
I think we're in a very different place than we were even in 2019. Like, there have been some very transformative policy decisions that I think really redefine Alberta's landscape for things like investment attraction and how easy it is to do business in this province. And you have to give a lot of this credit where it's due to outgoing Premier Jason Kenney. I mean, he's the one who brought in Alberta's job creation tax cut. We have far and away the most competitive corporate tax rate in this province of any Canadian province. Regulatory reform has been an area of laser focus for the United Conservative government over the last 3 years. Reducing red tape, not only when it comes to citizens accessing government services, but when it comes to businesses trying to do business and operate or relocate to this province. The provincial governments have been doing, I think, a lot of work to try and make that easier. So, expect some of that work to continue under Danielle Smith, but I think it's worth noting that that's a bit of a card in her back pocket, right? I mean, it's something that, she comes into office with the benefit of that momentum.
I'm really interested to see how her cabinet's going to take shape. I think we're going to see quite a number of rookie ministers come in. I expect that we'll see Pete Guthrie in there, Nathan Neudorf, Todd Lowen, Angela Pitt are some of the names that I'm kind of watching. I think, she brings Taves back into the fold. I think Brian gets the position specifically because his second place votes push her over the top. I think we see a lot of the people that publicly supported her in key roles in her government. So that's what I'll be watching for in the next couple of weeks.
Well, thank you, Mandi, Evan, and Bill. Now we're going to open it up to the questions that we've been receiving. So you can still get your questions in. We do have a lot. We're going to get through as many as we can, but you can use the Q&A button at the bottom of your Zoom window. Mandi, your answer is a great segue into our first question. What role do we expect Brian Jean to play within caucus around unifying the team?
I think Brian is an important part of caucus. I think he's got an incredibly large online following. He, has run in 2 consecutive leadership races. I expect that he'll play a significant role in both the unity of the party and in cabinet. And I think we saw him in a scrum yesterday saying that he would be happy to serve at the pleasure of Premier Danielle Smith in her cabinet. So yeah, I expect that he will take a role.
All right, Bill, I'm going to start with you on this one. Premier Kenney spent a lot of time bringing in big business and industry into Alberta. Can we expect the same from a Smith government? And can you talk about her economic development priorities?
Yeah, I think it has to remain a focus. Evan mentioned earlier, and I believe this to be true, Calgary is going to be the battleground in the next election. That's a city where, voters, especially center-right voters, think a lot about the economy, think a lot about the business environment. So it's something that the next premier, that Premier Smith is going to have to demonstrate continued focus on. As we've said, I mean, this wasn't a leadership campaign that had a lengthy policy book. It was one that was largely defined by a couple of very key issues that mattered, a lot to United Conservative Party members. So this will be one of the things that we're looking for additional clarity on over the next, days and weeks and months is what is her economic policy agenda?
And further to that, what do industry associations need to focus on as they start to engage with the government? What do we need to keep in mind when we frame our outreach?
So I think that we're actually at a bit of a moment in time as Smith's team transitions into the legislature and starts thinking about mandate priorities, where they are going to be needing to take the temperature of the public on a number of key issues. So for industry associations, businesses, thinking about how you present your priorities to public audiences, I mean, that matters, right? Because it's ultimately voters who are going to inform the policy priorities of, not only, Smith's government, but also the NDP opposition as they think about how they develop the platforms leading into the 2023 election. So making sure that your public audiences are cued into your value proposition is going to be a very important thing to think about.
Evan, I'll start with you on this one. What should we be looking for if we're trying to assess whether the United Conservative Party is actually united again?
I mean, that's a good question. Mandi had mentioned that there was a positive visual this morning outside of McDougall where the leadership candidates are standing there. There's been some positive media comments early on from the leadership contestants. I think that's a great first start. I think the biggest thing is just to watch how the party interacts over some of the bigger legislative initiatives that the Smith government will want to push forward over the next couple of months. Sometimes staying silent is being a helpful teammate, even if you're not fully in alignment. And so just some more discipline. There has been Premier Jason Kenney spoke about how he had an admiration for the Westminster system and the backbench's ability to speak out frequently in that system in the UK. I don't think Canadians are as accustomed to that, and especially in Alberta, there was quite a long leash. And I'm personally enjoy watching it for the drama of it at times. But I think Albertans have low tolerance for it. They want to know that government's running. They want to make sure that things are getting done, and that they're not a huge fan of watching inter-party fighting and mudslinging over at the legislature. So I'll just be watching for some just basic discipline over legislative initiatives getting through, that the party's more focused on talking about Rachel Notley than talking about each other. And I think those are just some obvious indicators to be looking out for.
I'll build on that because that's a really good point, Evan. Like so much of politics is theater, right? I think the real signal, one that we are not all going to have a direct line of sight to, is how does the caucus get along? Like, how does the caucus deal with difficult issues where there isn't clear or obvious alignment to start with? And that's going to be part of the challenge for Premier Smith, and that's going to be part of the challenge for her cabinet as they look to bring forward a policy agenda in what we know is going to be a short window of time. Is how do we get everybody pulling in the same direction? I think seeing all 7 leadership candidates standing together this morning, very powerful signal. And it's that kind of leadership from the top that I think puts the onus on the rest of the team to say, look, we're all in this together.
Cover this a little bit, but perhaps this is an opportunity to do a bit more of a deeper dive into it. How is this going to impact federal provincial relations? Bill, do you want to start?
Sure. I mean, I already alluded to the fact that I think climate policy is really at the crux of federal provincial relations. That is the I think the foremost policy area that I think highlights the differences in what the federal and provincial governments view as the future drivers of Alberta's economy. I think climate policy is a big one, and Smith's ability to be on the front foot and demonstrate clear, innovative, credible solutions on the path towards net zero will stand her in good stead in that regard. But I mean, another component to that is simply the intergovernmental relations component, right? Where having somebody who is a strong negotiator, who is able to kind of play chess, not checkers, when it comes to dealing with another level of government, that'll be critically important as well.
And Mandi, we're going to take 2 more questions here. I know we are getting short on time, but this question, Mandi, it's do you foresee Danielle Smith taking any action with respect to electricity and natural gas markets, energy and wires, in the name of affordability?
So this is, I think, a little bit of a complicated question because the electricity grid in Alberta, I think, is a little lacking, and we're going to see some issues with the push to net zero and the current electricity grid. So there does need to be some significant investment in that. So I don't think that there's any kind of cost savings that can be seen there. I think she's going to need to try and work with the federal government on some solutions around that. I think in the last couple of weeks, we've had several energy usage warnings. So it's going to be interesting times.
All right. And then the last question, maybe all 3 of you should give your opinion on this, but is there any chance that Alberta and the federal government might be able to agree on a carbon pricing system from 2023 to 2030?
Well, I'll jump in early.
Go ahead,
so I guess it depends what type of carbon pricing system is being referenced. If it's with regards to the heavy emitters equivalency, I think there's already been success in that in the past. When it comes to the actual the consumer and carbon levy, as the federal government would present it, carbon tax certainly would be how the province would present it. I see zero pathways on that. It's a hard line in the sand for the government. It certainly is a signal to core party supporters about it's a core value proposition for them. Do you oppose or support the carbon tax? And opposition to the carbon tax is a core value proposition for that flank of the party, and that will not be abandoned because it's something that can find large common consensus. And frankly, I think during a time of high inflation as well, that any discussions about increasing the price of fuel and any measure will be very unpopular, not just with conservative audiences, but I think you'll start to see that drip more into the center as well. So those are my 2 cents, but I'll let Bill tell me where I may have been wrong.
I agree with that, Evan. I think one of the interesting things for us to think about, and something I've been watching very closely, just because there's a leadership race doesn't mean that policy stops, right? I mean, government continues its work. One of the things that Alberta Environment and Parks has been, heavily focused on over the last number of months is a review of the tier system. So this is the industrial emitters, carbon tax substitute, if you will, which is in place in Alberta right now. So it's under review. And Premier Smith and her new cabinet are going to have to, they'll have a chance to pick up the ball on that and shape some future policy decisions. I agree with Evan entirely. Like I don't see it as a winning policy proposition for a conservative government in Alberta to focus carbon pricing toward consumers. That's something that historically, at least the Conservatives here in this province have used as a bit of a wedge issue against the NDP, and sort of tying the NDP's policy commitments on climate to those of Justin Trudeau in Ottawa, which may isn't a secret to anybody in this province, are not popular, right, with a lot of the general electorate. So I think as they think about how they position themselves on climate ahead of the next election, that's going to be a key consideration.
I'm keenly interested in who she puts in those key positions and how well they're able to collaborate with their federal counterparts.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining us today. It's exciting times in Alberta. If you have any questions that we didn't get to or that you think of afterwards, please feel free to shoot any of us an email. We're always happy to chat. And if you'd like to have a custom version of this, a conversation that's more about your sector, your industry, for your organization, your board, your members, your team, we'd love to do that. We're happy to do it. Send any of us an email and we'll set this up at any point. And you can subscribe to our newsletter through our website, crestviewstrategy.com, where we send weekly updates on what's happening in Alberta and all across Canada to help you stay informed. So thank you so much for joining us today, and have a wonderful long weekend.